Welcome to UFC World, where we dive deep into the biggest moments in combat sports. Have you ever seen an undefeated champion walk into the biggest fight of his career believing victory was already guaranteed, only to leave the arena unable to see from either eye? That is exactly what happened to Ilya Topuria, and the shocking events that unfolded at UFC Freedom 250 changed the landscape of the sport in a single night. Today, we are breaking down one of the most unbelievable stories in recent MMA history. A fight that completely altered the future of one of the sport's biggest stars. We will look at the brutal reality of Topuria's injuries, the strategic mistake that cost him everything, and the uncertain future ahead for both fighters. The confidence of Ilya Topuria leading into UFC Freedom 250 was unmatched. He entered the octagon looking completely untouchable, carrying an undefeated professional record and championships in 2 different weight classes. He had built an incredible reputation by knocking out 3 legendary opponents in consecutive fights, leading many fans to believe he was the new face of the UFC and one of the most complete fighters the sport had ever seen. His behavior reflected that absolute belief. In the days leading up to the event, Topuria made it clear that he expected another dominant victory, confidently predicting that Justin Gaethje would not survive the opening round. Topuria even participated in promotional content that many fans considered highly controversial, placing a white rose on a symbolic coffin representing Gaethje while suggesting that his opponent's career would end that night. His message could not have been clearer. He was not preparing for a difficult, grinding contest. He was preparing for another statement victory. The evening before the event, Topuria gathered friends and family in Washington, D.C. for what looked more like a victory celebration than a pre-fight dinner. Speaking proudly in Spanish, he told everyone that victory already belonged to them. The fight had not even taken place yet, but in his mind, the outcome was decided. What nobody knew at the time was that less than 24 hours later, everything would change. UFC Freedom 250 was unlike anything the promotion had ever organized before. This was not simply another pay-per-view event on the calendar. The historic card took place on June 15, 2026, right on the South Lawn of the White House, as part of President Donald Trump's 80th birthday celebration. The atmosphere was unlike anything fans had witnessed before in MMA history. Thousands of spectators filled the temporary venue. Fireworks lit up the sky. Military parachutists descended above the crowd, and American flags surrounded the arena. Before the opening fight even began, chants of USA echoed across the lawn. The entire sporting world was watching, and it was easily one of the biggest stages the UFC had ever created. Standing across the octagon from Topuria was the veteran Justin Gaethje. Despite his legendary reputation, very few people believed he could actually win this fight. Most betting markets listed him as more than a 6-1 underdog, and many analysts expected Topuria's speed, precision, and confidence to overwhelm him. But Gaethje had other plans. From the opening seconds, it became obvious that he had prepared for a very specific type of battle. Instead of chasing wild exchanges, he stayed patient, used his jab effectively, and controlled the distance. Whenever Topuria closed the gap, Gaethje welcomed him with powerful uppercuts inside the clinch. Those punches immediately began changing the trajectory of the fight. One clean uppercut landed early and appeared to damage the area around Topuria's right eye. It was not dramatic at first, and many fans probably overlooked it, but looking back after everything that happened, it may have been one of the most important punches of the entire contest. Round 1 largely belonged to Gaethje. His timing looked incredibly sharp, his accuracy surprised many observers, and most importantly, he was repeatedly finding the target around Topuria's orbital bone. For perhaps the first time in years, Topuria looked uncomfortable inside the cage. Still, champions respond under pressure, and that response came in the second round. Topuria dramatically increased the pace, attacking Gaethje's body with tremendous power. Shot after shot landed to the ribs and liver, and eventually, the pressure became too much. Gaethje hit the canvas, and suddenly the fight appeared to be slipping away from the veteran. The crowd expected Topuria to finish the contest right then and there, but here's where it gets interesting. Instead of continuing to throw strikes while Gaethje was hurt, Topuria chose another approach. He immediately searched for submissions, attempting to Gaethje somehow survived every single attempt. Later, his longtime coach Trevor Whitman described that sequence as the absolute turning point of the fight. According to Whitman, Gaethje had been badly hurt, and continuing with strikes might have ended everything. Choosing to grapple instead gave Gaethje precious time to recover. Little by little, he regained his strength, his legs returned, his breathing stabilized, and when both men stood back up, the momentum had completely shifted. What looked like Topuria's biggest opportunity became the exact moment that allowed Gaethje back into the fight. The third round changed everything. Gaethje returned with renewed confidence, and his punches carried even more power than before. He connected with a huge right hand that sent Topuria crashing toward the canvas, and moments later, another combination landed cleanly. Blood immediately appeared across Topuria's face, and every exchange became more dangerous. Although both fighters eventually landed the exact same number of significant strikes during the fight, the damage each man absorbed was very different. Gaethje's punches were landing almost exclusively around Topuria's eyes. With every passing minute, the swelling became more severe, and his face began changing before everyone's eyes. By the end of the third round, Topuria barely resembled the fighter who had entered the cage earlier that evening. His right eye was nearly swollen shut, and the left side of his face continued expanding. Television cameras captured disturbing images that immediately spread across social media, and even members of his own corner looked increasingly concerned. One of the most shocking moments came as medical officials examined him between rounds. The ringside doctor appeared ready to stop the contest. From the outside, it seemed like the safest decision. Topuria, however, refused. Despite the obvious injuries, he insisted on continuing. It was the mindset that had carried him through an undefeated career, and he believed he could still find a way to win. His competitive spirit simply would not allow him to quit. Many people admired that determination, while others questioned whether continuing was the right decision considering the condition of his face. Either way, the fight went on. Unfortunately for Topuria, the punishment continued as well. Gaethje kept targeting the damaged area, and every successful punch seemed to make the swelling even worse. His vision appeared increasingly compromised, and his reaction slowed. The confidence that had defined him before the fight slowly disappeared. The champion who had predicted a first-round knockout now found himself desperately trying to survive. By the end of the fourth round, the situation had become impossible to ignore. Topuria's corner looked at their fighter, they looked at the damage, and then they made the difficult decision. Before the fifth round could begin, they stopped the fight. Justin Gaethje had completed one of the biggest upsets in UFC history against overwhelming odds on the biggest stage the UFC had ever produced. The veteran had defeated one of the most dominant champions in the sport. While Gaethje celebrated with the lightweight championship around his waist, Topuria quietly left the octagon before the official announcement had even been completed. Very few people watching realized that the most shocking part of the story had not happened inside the cage. It would begin only after Topuria arrived at the hospital. After the fight, the celebration quickly gave way to serious concern. Topuria did not remain inside the octagon to reflect on the defeat or speak with reporters. Instead, UFC officials rushed him out of the cage almost immediately. Before the official result had even been announced to the crowd, he was already on his way to a hospital in Washington, D.C. That decision alone revealed just how worried everyone backstage had become. Dana White has witnessed countless brutal fights throughout his career, seeing broken bones, devastating knockouts, and injuries that most people could hardly imagine. Yet during the post-fight press conference, even he appeared genuinely concerned about Topuria's condition. Speaking to reporters, White admitted that the UFC wasted no time getting the former champion medical attention. He explained that Topuria's eye looked badly damaged and said he suspected there could be a broken orbital bone, although he emphasized that he was not a doctor and preferred to wait for the official diagnosis. More than anything else, White said his only priority was making sure Topuria recovered completely before even thinking about fighting again. Those comments stood out. Dana White is normally focused on future matchups and championship plans immediately after a major event. This time, however, there was no discussion about rematches or title opportunities. The only concern was Topuria's health. Meanwhile, heartbreaking brother Alexandre helped him leave the arena after the fight, carefully supporting him as he struggled to walk with his badly swollen face. Only one night earlier, the two brothers had been celebrating what they believed would be another championship victory, but now they were leaving under completely different circumstances. A few days later, Topuria finally broke his silence. Instead of making excuses or blaming the referee, the judges, or bad luck, he chose complete honesty. Writing on Instagram, he congratulated Justin Gaethje on the victory and acknowledged that his opponent had accomplished exactly what he promised before the fight. Gaethje had said he would leave his mark on Topuria's face, and according to Topuria, he did far more than that. He revealed that he lost vision in his right eye during the opening round, and then, by the end of the second round, he also lost vision in his left eye. Those words shocked the entire MMA community. It meant that Topuria had continued fighting through the third and fourth rounds without being able to see properly. He explained that he entered the fight after one of the best training camps of his career, felt fully prepared, and believed he was in outstanding condition, yet he refused to make any excuses. Instead, he simply admitted that the better man won that night, and reminded fans that glory and suffering often exist side by side inside combat sports. The revelation about his eyesight completely changed the way many fans viewed the fight, turning a tough loss into an extraordinary display of courage. Few athletes would willingly continue under those circumstances. Medical experts later explained why orbital fractures are considered among the most serious facial injuries in combat sports. These fractures usually occur after repeated blunt force impacts around the eye socket. Besides the obvious pain, they can also create double vision, nerve damage, or even permanent eyesight problems if not treated correctly. Because of those risks, fighters who suffer orbital fractures are normally placed under lengthy medical suspensions before being cleared to compete again. Then came the official medical report. According to information reported by Spanish media, doctors confirmed that Topuria had suffered fractures to both orbital bones. Fortunately, neither fracture had shifted out of position. Because the bones remained properly aligned, surgery would not be necessary. That represented the best possible outcome considering how severe the injuries had looked during the fight. However, the report also made it clear that the right side of his face had absorbed significantly more damage than the left. Although surgery was avoided, recovery would still require patience, and doctors recommended several months of complete rest before any serious physical training could begin again. Regular medical examinations and imaging would also be necessary to ensure that both fractures healed correctly. For that reason, Topuria was expected to remain inactive for the rest of 2026. The announcement immediately became one of the biggest talking points in the MMA world. Only days before, many people had been discussing his chances of becoming the UFC's first three-division champion, but now, the conversation had completely changed. Instead of talking about future title fights, everyone was discussing recovery timelines and long-term health. While Topuria focused on healing, Justin Gaethje addressed the media after the biggest victory of his career. Despite celebrating the championship, he also acknowledged the condition of his opponent. In one unforgettable sentence, Gaethje summarized the entire night, saying that Topuria had entered the fight as a world champion, but now he was in the hospital while Gaethje was standing at the press conference with the belt. It was a brutally honest statement, not intended as disrespect, but simply the reality of what had happened. Gaethje also reflected on the crucial moment during the second round. When Topuria nearly finished the fight, Gaethje believed his opponent made a costly mistake by chasing submissions instead of continuing to strike. That decision, according to Gaethje, allowed him to recover and completely change the direction of the contest. He also admitted that surviving those difficult moments required every bit of experience he had accumulated throughout his long UFC career. Gaethje explained that he knew the opening rounds would be dangerous and fully expected Topuria to come out aggressively. His plan was simply to survive the early storm, trust his durability, and rely on his conditioning once the fight entered the later rounds. Looking back, everything unfolded almost exactly the way he had predicted. By the championship rounds, the momentum belonged entirely to him. At 37 years old, after years of unforgettable wars inside the octagon, Justin Gaethje had finally achieved his dream of becoming the undisputed UFC light. It represented far more than the loss of a championship belt. It forced him to completely rethink the future he had carefully planned. Before UFC Freedom 250, many believed he was on the verge of making even more history. After becoming champion in 2 different weight classes, discussions had already begun about a possible move to welterweight, where he hoped to chase an unprecedented 3rd UFC title. Those ambitious plans have now been placed on hold, as recovering from 2 orbital fractures must come before anything else. Following his medical update, Topuria made one thing absolutely clear. Although he accepted the defeat without excuses, he has no intention of letting this become the final chapter of his rivalry with Justin Gaethje. In his Instagram statement, he promised fans that he would heal, rest, and eventually return stronger, smarter, and even more dangerous than before. He ended his message with a powerful promise to regain what he lost. From Gaethje's perspective, however, there was no reason for an immediate second fight. He pointed out that he had won 3 of the 4 completed rounds before Topuria's corner stopped the contest. In his eyes, the result was decisive, believing he had earned a clear victory and preferred to move forward rather than revisit the same opponent right away. That difference in opinion has already created one of the biggest questions facing the lightweight division. Will the UFC eventually book a rematch once Topuria is healthy, or will both fighters head in completely different directions? At the same time, another unexpected discussion has emerged. Instead of asking who Gaethje will defend the title against next, some people are wondering whether he should defend it at all. Former UFC champion Demetrius Johnson surprised many fans by suggesting that this might actually be the perfect ending to Gaethje's remarkable career. Johnson argued that Gaethje has accomplished nearly everything a fighter could dream of. He has been an interim champion, competed in multiple title fights, and now he has finally captured the undisputed lightweight championship on the biggest stage in UFC history. According to Johnson, there may be nothing left for him to prove. Financially, the event was also unforgettable for Gaethje. In addition to winning the championship, he received both the Fight of the Night and Performance of the Night bonuses, earning a combined $825,000 in bonus money alone. He told reporters that after this fight, every question he had ever asked himself would finally have an answer. Now that he has reached the top of the mountain, only he knows whether another championship run still motivates him, or whether retirement has become a realistic possibility. Some fans are already looking beyond that question, with rumors surrounding a possible showdown between Max Holloway and Conor McGregor at UFC 329. Speculation has begun about a blockbuster title fight involving Gaethje and the winner of that matchup. Nothing has been officially confirmed, but it remains one of the most talked about possibilities in the sport. As for Topuria, patience will now become his greatest challenge. Nobody knows whether he will eventually return to featherweight, where he once ruled as champion, or remain at lightweight in pursuit of revenge against Gaethje. Everything depends on how his recovery progresses over the coming months. Doctors appear optimistic, especially because surgery was avoided, but no one wants to rush the healing process after such serious facial injuries. The priority is making sure he returns completely healthy, not simply returning as quickly as possible. After all, championship belts can always be won again. Eyesight cannot. Despite suffering the first defeat of his professional career, Topuria has already overcome enormous obstacles throughout his journey. He shocked the MMA world by knocking out Alexander Volkanovski, silenced doubters again by defeating Max Holloway, and added another unforgettable victory by stopping Charles Oliveira. Time after time, he has built his career by proving people wrong. Now Topuria begins a new journey, whether he returns to reclaim the lightweight title, chases another featherweight championship, or eventually earns the rematch he desperately wants. Only time will reveal the next chapter. One thing, however, is already certain. UFC Freedom 250 will forever be remembered as the night when one of the sport's most dominant undefeated champions experienced the toughest test of his career, while Justin Gaethje completed one of the greatest underdog victories in UFC history. If you got value from this video, smash that like button, it really helps the channel, and subscribe to UFC World for more deep dives like this. Hit the bell so you never miss an analysis when it drops. Thanks for watching! If you found this video valuable, please like and subscribe.